This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Cavalry Audio.
The desert, and the entire Southwest really, is one of the most wonderfully weird and often terrifying places in the country. But despite the many dangers lurking in the desert, the actual scariest part of the American Southwest is what happens when the darkest, most sinister parts of humanity use the desert landscape as a backdrop for some of the most shockingly heinous murders ever committed. From Cavalry Audio, I'm your host, Margot Carmichael, and I'm here with my co-host and sister,
Jenna Gerald.
And you are listening to the very first episode of Death by Southwest. Each week, we'll be bringing you stories of murder, ranging from the utterly bizarre to the downright bone-chilling, but all with one thing in common. Every murder story that we explore will take place right here in the strange and mysterious American Southwest. Today, we have a murder story for you that takes place in a city often referred to as the gambling capital of the world, or, depending on your particular proclivity, some may think of it as the stripper capital of the world. It's the city where sins and sinners alike are welcomed with open arms. What city do you think I'm talking about?
Sin City, Las Vegas, Nevada.
You got it. Las Vegas, Nevada. So today's murder story centers around the murder of Esmeralda Gonzalez, a 24-year-old model whose body was found buried in the Mojave Desert months after she was reported missing. It's a story with tons of twists and turns and plenty of sex, drugs, and pool cleaner. But more on that later.
When did this happen?
2019.
Okay.
All right, so let's get the fuck into it. Las Vegas, Sin City. How do you feel about Vegas?
I like it for about 2 to 3 days. I think there's a cool energy about it. It's a lot. It's pricey. It's hot, typically. And it's super fun. Yeah, I was thinking they call it Sin City, the stripper capital of something. The
Gambling capital.
Yeah. I was also thinking like the adult Disneyland.
I think that's a good way to refer to it. The adult Disney. I mean, I like the kid Disneyland as well.
Well, me too.
But
this is different. Adult as in
adult entertainment.
Right.
Yes. Should we talk about our times in Vegas?
Nope.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
What did you want to say about it?
I don't know.
We went there for our bachelorettes.
That's right. Mine and yours.
Mm-hmm.
You are still married. I am not.
Probably nothing to do with Vegas. But
no, nothing to do with Vegas.
I mean, I'm interested. What were you going to say about it?
I don't know.
All I can think of is Planet Hollywood for yours.
Mm-hmm. And we got a stripper to the room.
A stripper? I can't remember what he looked like. He wore a purple Speedo, though.
Yes, he did.
Because he lifted me up and put his face in between my legs.
Okay, there's our Vegas story, or at least what we're willing to share of our Vegas story. So our story today takes place in Las Vegas. And while most people are probably somewhat familiar with Vegas from movies and TV, you're probably most familiar with the Strip because it's one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. A lot of people think of Vegas and don't think of anything except for the Las Vegas Strip, which is a 4-mile-long stretch of road lined with casinos and hotels. But Las Vegas is definitely more than just the Strip. And we're going to find that out in our story today, which, by the way, is pretty dark. So I thought we'd start off with a little bit of light trivia and fun facts about Vegas to kind of dip our toe in the Vegas pool before we dive headfirst into the extremely dark underbelly that exists in Vegas. And for those of you listening who maybe aren't familiar with Vegas outside of what you've seen on movies and TV, maybe you've never been there, maybe you don't live in this part of the country and have such easy access to kind of get to Vegas. This is a little bit of a light overview of Vegas before we go ahead and just scare the shit out of you about Vegas. You never want to go there. So I'm going to test your map skills and hopefully give listeners a location visual as to where Vegas and Nevada are on a map. Not that you've never seen a map before. I know our listeners are incredibly intelligent, but I'm guessing no one is sitting in front of a map right now. So let's jump in. Can you name every state that borders Nevada, which is the state that Las Vegas is in?
Okay. Arizona, California, Colorado. No, that's wrong.
Yeah, California, Arizona, Utah. You got 2 more.
2 more? I thought you said there's 4 that border it. 5. Oh, well, no, I'm just picking out of a hat. New Mexico.
No.
Okay, Arizona, California,
Utah. I'll save you.
Yeah, please.
Okay, it's bordered by Oregon to the northwest.
What?
Idaho to the northeast.
Okay, that makes sense. Oregon, that's how high up it is. So it hits northern California.
Idaho to the northeast, California to the west, Arizona to the southeast, and Utah to the east.
Oh, I got to recheck out a map.
Yeah, you gotta brush up on your map skills here. It's located in Clark County and anchors the Las Vegas Valley metropolitan area. It is the largest city within the greater Mojave Desert. But what surprised me, actually, it's not the capital of Nevada. Do you know what the capital of Nevada is?
I did in 5th grade.
I don't know if I did.
What is it?
Carson City.
Okay, I've heard of it, but
Yeah.
I would have never gotten that.
So even though the city of Las Vegas is not the capital of Nevada, it is the most populous city in the state with 653,533 residents. It's a huge tourist destination, home to more than half of the 20 largest hotels in the world. And over 42 million people visit Las Vegas each year.
Well, that's what I was thinking when earlier you said, like, if you're not from the Southwest or don't reside in the Southwest, you may not be that familiar with Vegas. I get, as in maybe you haven't had access like we have. We can drive there 5 hours from Tucson.
Right.
I was also thinking when I've been in Vegas, there's a lot of not only outside of Southwest individuals, but outside of country.
Yeah, outside
tourists.
of the United States. Yeah, outside of country tourists. International tourists.
That's right.
Yeah. And then on the Las Vegas Strip, I've never done any of these things, but I would love to try all of them. There's a ton of different things to do beyond just gambling and strip clubs and drinking. And just a few that caught my eye when I was reading about Vegas is that you can take a spin on the world's largest observation wheel called the High Roller. You can ride on a Venetian gondola. You've done that in real life in Venice.
Well, no, we didn't do like the with the 2-person. We didn't do that shit. That's too touristy. But we did ride on, and I can't remember now what's called the water taxi.
Okay, so you did not ride on a Venetian gondola in Venice, but you can do that in Vegas, or you can watch the iconic fountains of Bellagio, which actually I have done.
I have a picture of Michael standing in
The
that.
fountains?
Yes.
Illegally, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Rule breaker.
Yeah.
Off topic. Here we go. We're going to reel it back in. Okay, so that was kind of the, top line Cliff Notes version of just a couple of little Vegas facts. Beyond that, it doesn't get a ton of rainfall. It's very similar to where we live here in Tucson in that it's a desert climate, very dry, very hot. So now that we've kind of covered the more glittery, touristy version of Vegas, which for any Vegas residents, I apologize because that was kind of a tourist overview. But let's talk crime in Vegas now, just to give a little context to some of the larger crimes that have happened before we jump into our true crime story for the day. I think we can agree that Vegas is no stranger to crime. In recent years and even in recent weeks, there have been numerous violent crimes that have made major national headlines. Without taking it too dark, I'm guessing that a lot of people remember the tragic shooting that was actually deemed the deadliest mass shooting committed by an individual in the United States history.
I think it's very important for you to understand that this investigation is going to be long and contracted.
Anybody who maybe doesn't know about this was October 1st, 2017. It involved a 64-year-old Nevada resident, Stephen Paddock, who opened fire on a crowd attending the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival taking place on the Las Vegas Strip. He fired over 1,000 bullets from his 32nd floor suite at the Mandalay Bay Hotel.
But we are looking at an excess of 50 individuals dead and over 200 individuals injured.
And ended up killing 60 people and wounding at least 413. Obviously, this was a horrifically tragic event, and without hopefully being disrespectful, we're not going to spend too much time. I'm just wanting to paint a picture of crimes that have occurred in Vegas.
Well, and it matters. Like, it's saying this happened. It's terrible. This isn't about that. And also, good grief.
In recent months, I don't know if I think you've seen this. I think we've talked about it, that the water levels in Lake Mead have been dropping, and that has meant that numerous bodies have been coming to the surface that have been dumped in that lake in years past. And this one I specifically do not want to get too deep into because we may or may not have a future episode based on these. And then more recently, very recently on October 6th this year, they deemed this person the strip stabber. He was a Guatemalan man who apparently entered the U.S., not necessarily going through
illegally?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. I was trying to say that appropriate. I'm so concerned with making sure that everything I say is appropriate.
Illegally?
Yeah, illegally. He
that
didn't
doesn't mean you agree with the hoops people have to jump through to become illegal, but based on this country's laws, he was entered illegally.
And he's been accused of stabbing 8 people on the Las Vegas Strip. 2 of them have died from the wounds. That was just a few weeks ago.
I had never heard of that.
So, crimes are prevalent everywhere, but there are a lot of national headline-making crimes in Vegas. There's also plenty of other violent crimes and murders in Vegas that, for whatever reason, receive far less news coverage. For example, our story today.
Esmeralda
Gonzalez was a 24-year-old Instagram model that was brutally murdered and buried in the desert outside of Las Vegas. And when I came across this story, honestly, I had never heard of it. It happened in 2019, so not that long ago. And there is not a ton of coverage on it. There was not as much information about the victim, Esmeralda, or the accused murderers as I had hoped to find.
You just said accused murderers. So that let me know that
good catch.
Someone has been not maybe convicted, but accused, and that there's more than one.
That was a good catch. You're like a detective over there.
Yeah.
I think that because it's such a horrific murder story that received such little media attention, I feel like it's important to share and get it out there more. And I say that without being I don't want to be preachy. I don't want to be we're getting this out there to try and get awareness. That's a great thing, but that's also not necessarily the point of this show. But I do think that this story serves as a really good cautionary tale for the fact that you never know who's living next door to you.
I just thought of Jeffrey Dahmer.
It's not quite that far.
That's fine.
But you don't know who's living right next door to you ever, really. And this murder occurred in a residential neighborhood in Las Vegas, but outside of the Strip. So Esmeralda was living life in a suburb of Las Vegas. She was originally from Michoacan, Mexico, which it's kind of in the southwest part of Mexico. And while I'm not sure when she moved to Las Vegas, she attended school at UNLV, the University of Las Vegas. Again, not a ton of information on who she was as a person, but according to her Instagram account, on which she had 300,000 followers, she listed herself as a real estate investor, a humanitarian, a social scientist, an anthropologist, and a foreign model. Which, without even looking at any of her pictures or anything, if I'm looking at somebody's Instagram bio and I see all those things, whoa, that's a lot. How can you be all of those things? And maybe she said that and she didn't mean, I'm not professionally an anthropologist. Yeah. I'm not professionally this.
A social scientist means I got a bachelor's in communication. She's interested in
sociology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's in her bio. But then once you go and kind of just flip through her pictures, which obviously I did, to me, I would assume that the most prominent career in that list is model. I'm going to show you, which you have not seen. You have no idea what she looks like. You've never seen her Instagram. So I'm going to show it to you. And I want to preface this by saying no judgment here.
So you're saying I can't judge?
Well, you can judge. I'm saying I'm trying to be I don't know how to like describe this Instagram without sounding judgmental, because I'm not. Because if I looked like her, my Instagram would look like this as well. Unfortunately, my Instagram is 99% of my dogs.
Okay, so what would be you don't have to say it, but I'm going to guess what you might say. Like, whoa, that's a lot of pictures of yourself, girl.
It just kind of sounds judgy to be like, wow, that's a lot of scantily clad photos of yourself.
But it's also factual.
It is factual. And reading that bio first, which I read in an article actually before I ever looked at her Instagram, I had a picture in my mind and the photos did not match up to that.
Oh, okay.
Anthropologist, social scientist, humanitarian. And this is super stereotypical of me. I'll be honest. I don't know what I was picturing. I wasn't picturing this. This to me looks kind of like a promo for an OnlyFans account.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. In my head, I read those things and I wasn't thinking that this is what the photos would be. I thought maybe I'd see her on like an archaeological dig or something.
I took
it literally.
Phrases very literally.
Very literally, yeah. I say all of this because it is pertinent to the story in that there seems to be some discrepancy in the articles and the sources that I found as to what her profession was. Some news stories, some articles listed her as a model, some as an Instagram model. Some called her a sex worker, a prostitute, and a stripper. And I have no idea. I could not find a clear-cut confirmation on any of those things. Yeah, yes, Jenna's raising her hand right now. But
so
please.
Sex worker?
Mm-hmm.
At least in my mind, and I'm not the knower of all things, most things, but not all. A sex worker encompasses prostitute and I think stripper. Even though
that's true. I think you're right. I probably could have just said sex worker and left the other two out. So there were some people that said that she was a sex worker. Others said that she was a model. And ultimately, honestly, it's kind of irrelevant because I can't tell you what she was. According to her friends and family, she was a kind, sweet, genuine person, that she had a very bubbly personality, that her laugh was infectious. She was described as a loving daughter and sister. And I only found a few personal accounts of people talking about her, but here's one. This was a woman who lived on the same street as her.
She was very sweet, very nice. She had a cute little toy poodle, and she would sit out on the little bench there, and she would she's just very pleasant every time we speak.
Beyond her kind of sweet disposition, Esmeralda was also apparently someone who struggled with mental illness. According to her older brother, Juan, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. You being a therapist, tell us a little bit about both of those diseases. What do they mean? What does it entail?
Well, some people choose to see mental illness in the disease model, which, again, I'm not saying I don't, but I'm not going to give any personal opinions. Anyways, okay. So bipolar used to be called manic depression.
Right.
Bipolar in general is episodes of highs and lows. Mania being impulsivity, doing things that you typically wouldn't do, spending a lot of money, having a lot of sex, driving a fast car even. Depression.
And that's the lows of bipolar.
That's the lows of bipolar.
Okay.
And then what, schizophrenia?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's characterized by delusions and hallucinations, but not everyone diagnosed with schizophrenia experiences hallucinations, but delusions, paranoia, thinking people are after you, or kind of, here's a real world example where someone will like kind of walk into a room and people are chitty-chatting and then kind of giggling, and this person walks in the room and they kind of stop and look up, and that person automatically assumes they're talking about them. Now that could happen to any of us.
Sure.
But also like that constantly, consistently on small to big scales.
Got it.
Yeah.
Is schizophrenia not multiple personalities?
No, it's not.
I kind of thought it was. I think that's a common misconception maybe.
Yeah.
Voices in your head?
Well, we all have voices in our head.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
Okay, so, but let's backtrack track, I guess.
Sure.
Her brother said she suffered from mental illness
Yeah.
and identified, who knows if it was a formal diagnosis or not, but identified schizophrenia and bipolar.
Yeah, I think she was formally diagnosed and on medication, which she, for both of these diseases, and I'm going to get to why. I'm going to get to the why in a second.
The why of what?
The why I believe she was on medication in a moment.
Don't miss what happens next in today's episode. We'll be right back after a short message from our sponsors.
So Esmeralda was reported missing on May 30th or 31st of 2019. There's a little bit of gray here. By her brother Juan, who hadn't heard from her in a while. I don't know exactly how long, but he went to her house to check on her and found that her front door was open and unlocked and the lights were on, but she was nowhere to be found. Her house had been ransacked, which obviously caused some concern. Her cell phone, I believe, and her car and all of her kind of personal belongings were there. So it was like the house had been ransacked, but nothing had necessarily been stolen, at least that her brother could tell.
And the door was open.
The door was open. I don't know if it was cracked, if it was wide open, that was unclear. And obviously this caused concern and I think perhaps a heightened concern due to her mental illness. So that was May 30th or 31st, 2019. And, in the weeks following this, her older brother Juan, who reported her missing, spoke to the media a lot because he was very concerned about her. So I have a little clip that I want to play of him talking about his younger sister.
My family and I were worried sick. It's a very agonizing and heart-wrenching experience. It's not like her to go missing like this. It's very shocking to us. We don't know where she could be. We don't know why she would leave. She's diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. We feel it's very important for the public to understand how vulnerable she is. Esmeralda, we miss you, we love you, and we're all very worried about you, and we love you very much.
So I want to go through the last days and hours that she was seen before he reported her missing. So according to a neighbor, a different neighbor than we heard that clip from earlier, on May 30th, she asked this neighbor, his name is Brent Smith, for a ride to the BMW dealership, which he agreed to do. He apparently drove her there, drove her back home, and dropped her off. She was locked out of her car.
First time I met her is when she came and asked for a ride to go to the BMW dealership. It was in the middle of the day. It was me and my boy. She said she got locked out of her car. That was it. Give her a ride back home, unlock her car door, and that was it.
So initially, police, I saw a news report where they had an image of this guy, Brent Smith, and they were putting out to the public, like, the last known person she was seen with was him. We need to find him. Ultimately, they found him. They thought maybe he was a suspect. They cleared him. He was not. He simply took her home. It was kind of like a nice neighborly thing to do. And then the next time that she was seen, she was captured on CCTV surveillance cameras. And it's unclear. There were several sources that said it was the same day as she went to the BMW dealership, but just later in that day. Some say it was the next day. But the next time that she was seen was wandering around her neighborhood, dressed only in lingerie and high heels, and asking people for a ride. To where, I don't know. But sources that saw her, and then also according to this surveillance footage, she looked disoriented. She was stumbling, kind of walking off balance. Some sources claimed that she was drunk or on drugs. Other sources believe that she was suffering from like a mental break. I do know that apparently she was on medication for bipolar and schizophrenia. And prior to her being reported missing, she went off her medication 2 weeks prior.
Which is not super uncommon for not only those diagnoses, but a lot of people on medication, whether they have severe mental illness or not. Just people don't want to be on medication for various reasons. And I was wondering that actually when you first told me she was diagnosed.
Yeah. Apparently she wandered up to a miscellaneous house in her neighborhood and tried to just walk inside the house. The homeowners heard or saw her walking into their home, came up to her and said, like, I'm sorry, miss, you have the wrong house. Please leave. So they turned her away. She then allegedly wandered up to a home several doors down from this first home that she tried to enter, which was only about a 10th of a mile from her house. So it's really, really close in the same neighborhood. And this second house that she wandered up to belonged to a man named Christopher Prestopino. But unlike the previous house that she tried to walk into, when she walked up to Prestopino's house, he welcomed her inside.
Huh.
Mm-hmm. Now, some sources claim that Prestopino had hired her as a prostitute for the night, while others claim that she was simply trying to get home and unluckily kind of ended up on his doorstep where he welcomed her in.
Why unluckily?
Because what happened after that is an absolute nightmare. But before we get into that, let's talk about Christopher Prestopino a little bit.
Sounds Italian.
I'm guessing he was. He was 45 years old at the time that this crime that we're about to unfold happened. According to his LinkedIn page, he was a stagehand audio-visual technician at Bally's and Paris Hotel in Las Vegas from 1999 to present, which was 2019. And I was not able to actually find his Facebook page today, like it must have been taken down. But I found several articles that at the time they were written, his Facebook page was available. And so they had taken screenshots and whatnot. So several articles shared images and information from his Facebook page. And while I don't think that just because you put it on social media, that doesn't determine you as a human, but I think it is helpful painting a picture of this man.
What was on there?
The first thing that I noticed is the variety of kind of lewd jokes and images on his page. His cover photo shows this like collage with a rubber sex doll and then an image of his face kind of pasted on what looks like a Ken doll's body, but then has a cowboy hat over his groin area. And then there's cursive writing that looks like it was written with like an iPad pen or something that says, "I still play with dolls."
Ew.
Yeah, a little bit creepy. One of these articles focused really heavily, I don't necessarily agree with this, but you can list TV shows and movies and things like that you like on your Facebook page. Listed a bunch of TV shows. This article really just focused on the fact that he had Dexter listed.
Oh, okay. And also, gosh, I
love Dexter.
If I wanted to list TV shows, I like Dexter too.
You take that's situational, because I watch a lot of dark TV. That does not mean I'm going to murder anyone ever. But I think that if you find someone who has committed a lot of crimes, and they also happen to like dark TV.
Did he commit a lot of crimes? Also, did this person, whoever this person that wrote the article, they just had an assumption or for whatever reason had a reason to believe that this was the killer murderer, and then confirmation bias takes over and you're going to find evidence.
That's it.
For whatever the heck you want.
Yes, this was written after he was already, allegedly involved in a crime.
Got it.
And confirmation bias, yes. Can you tell us very briefly what confirmation bias is?
Whatever I believe to be the truth, even if I don't have factual facts, I can find evidence to support my belief / argument / slant on a story.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, with the internet, that seems like anybody can do that with anything. This article also pointed out that he liked a page that was selling fetish art, which
I feel like that's confirmation bias too.
Yes.
You know how many people, lovely, wonderful, non-murderers, like something that might be considered a fetish.
Sure. Exactly. And so
what kind of fetish was it?
I don't know. It didn't specify, and his page is no longer there. Someone later on in this story called in an anonymous tip about Christopher and about Esmeralda. And I'm going to get to that later, so I'm not going to go into it. But part of what she said is pertinent to this picture that we're painting about Christopher. She claimed Christopher loved women and was very much into sex. He watched a lot of porn, had a lot of sex toys, and all of these things, again, are just to paint a picture. I think most people watch porn. Lots of people love sex toys. It doesn't mean that you're a murderer or that you are a dangerous person or anything. It just is. I
think for a lot of people, even if they like all those things, to me, if someone says they watched a lot of porn, they liked women, they love women, they had a lot of sex, blah, 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 I try not to make any assumptions. But somewhere in my mind, it wouldn't be murderer. It would be a sexual deviant might come into mind, which also isn't a good thing.
Is it not? Is a sexual deviant, does that refer to like violence?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Doing something
Against someone else's will?
Yeah, or I will fact check it, but yeah, that's at least what I believe it means.
Oh, okay. I just looked it up. So a sexual deviant the definition is any sexual behavior such as paraphilia that is regarded as significantly different from the standards established by a culture or subculture. Deviant forms of sexual behavior may include voyeurism, fetishism, bestiality, necrophilia, sadism, and exhibitionism.
I'd take exhibitionism off there, and I'd take
voyeurism off there?
Well, no, because to me, even though it's not that big a deal to me, you're involving someone who's not you're looking out the window to someone who doesn't know you're looking, essentially.
Or I'm having sex with my windows open to let anybody else look in.
Okay, yeah, so that's a good distinction.
Fetishism, I could have a foot fetish. There's nothing wrong with that.
To me, that's not.
Bestiality, I have a problem with.
Well, duh, because it's not a willing participant.
Yeah, it's an animal that is not willing to.
To me, that your definition tracks.
And necrophilia feels
not a willing participant.
Right.
They can't say yay or nay.
Yeah. So and that is actually comes from the APA Dictionary of Psychology. That's the definition.
I'm going to go with your definition.
Okay, great. Look at me, so smart today. Anyways, all right. The whole point of mentioning that about Christopher Prestopino was just, I'm just adding to the kind of very generic general picture that I was able to gather about him. And adding further to this picture is the fact that he was a convicted felon. Clark County online records show that Prestopino has multiple drug charges on his criminal history, including one for manufacturing meth. So that is all the information I could basically find on Christopher Prestopino. So we are going to jump back now to Esmeralda. So she was missing for a while, for a couple months without any leads. It wasn't until late July 2019 that an anonymous tip, in addition to several non-anonymous tips, came into the police department about Prestopino. The overall gist of these tips, which all involved Prestopino, was that he had bragged to multiple people that he killed the girl who was missing in Vegas. And this is kind of where the dots start to connect for police. There were 3-ish tipsters who called into police saying, one of them anonymous, saying like, I heard a story, I'm not willing to share my name, about this man who kidnapped and this woman. Another one said, oh, this woman went to this man's house that I know, Christopher Prestopino, and he's been bragging that he killed her. It was a little bit of a giant game of telephone, honestly, because a lot of it was kind of like, I heard from my girlfriend who heard from her friend that this man, Christopher Prestopino, killed this woman. But it obviously piqued the police and investigators' interest.
The LVPD.
LVPD, there you go. So one of the most incriminating tips was made by a family friend of Christopher Prestopino's. Her name was Trisha Ott. The information Trisha provided ultimately led police to look into Christopher Prestopino, and what they found was mind-blowing. So before we get into her tip, I want to just take you chronologically into what the police found when they started looking into him. So on June 6th, now remember, when was Esmeralda reported missing?
May 30th.
Right. On June 6th at 8:50 p.m., surveillance footage of Prestopino going to Home Depot and purchasing 2 boxes of deck skirts, 2 tubes of WD-40, Ocean Mist air freshener, 10 96-inch 2x4 studs, 5 60-pound bags of concrete mix, 1 50-pound bag of lye, and 8 concrete cap fence blocks, all paid for with cash, was all captured on video. I don't know what some of those things are, but it all sounds bad. The next day, June 7th, he is caught again on surveillance camera returning to Home Depot to buy a drill and a concrete mixing paddle. On June 8th, Prestopino is seen renting a 15-foot U-Haul truck. 2 days later, he returns the moving truck back to the same exact U-Haul that he rented it from in Las Vegas. I mean, it's not like a big
I don't know that. Well, I don't understand the U-Haul truck necessarily. I know the phrase deck, whatever, probably doesn't refer to a backyard deck, but I just pictured he is concreting her in or under his deck or something. But the U-Haul then threw a wrench in that for me.
I like seeing where your brain's going with this.
So I feel like whatever, if he is the individual who murdered her, is going to take her body, I don't know, do what with it, and put it in concrete and shove it under something.
With 5 or whatever 60-pound bags of concrete, I think it's a fair assumption.
Where's he going to put it? Well, we'll find out.
I mean, for me, honestly, the most incriminating thing in there is the lie. Unless you are hunting, which I don't think there's a ton of happening in Vegas. Why are you buying lie? I don't know. I don't know the other uses for lie, but I don't think there's many except for decomposing things. I hear lie, I think murder. So sometime after this is when that family friend of Prestipino's, Trisha Ott, she came forward and told police that during those 2 days that Christopher had that U-Haul rented, he called her to come over because he needed help with something, is what he said to her. And according to Trisha, when she arrived at his house, he began to tell her a story about an unnamed female that came over to hang out. And they got high on methamphetamines. And this female started freaking out and apparently talking in, quote, the devil's tongue and threatening to call the cops on Christopher. So he didn't want the cops called on him. He obviously has several felony drug charges already. So he tied her up to a chair, according to Trisha, to calm her down. And when he went to untie her, she punched him in the face. Things escalated and he strangled her to the point where she passed out. He thought she was dead. Oh, and I should have mentioned this earlier. She's tiny. I showed you her Instagram. We didn't even describe her.
It's hard to tell though. Like, I mean, she's not a big human, but
right.
I couldn't tell. Is she tall? Like,
she's
it's
5
hard to
foot,
tell.
5 foot tall, about 110 pounds.
Okay.
Very tiny human.
So he went to untie her. I can only assume, which is not a good thing to do, but I'll just do it anyways. Assume that he had thought, okay, it's been an hour, however long, maybe 50 hours. Hopefully not. She's calmed down.
Right.
Let me untie her.
Right. And then she punched him in the face. And he was like, oh, she's not calm.
Right.
So I'm going to wrestle her back down. And at this point, she is fighting back. And they physically fought to the point where then he started to strangle her. Now, again, this is allegedly according to Trisha. She then told police that Chris had a U-Haul truck. And in the back of the truck, there was a cement mixer and a freezer that was apparently taped and strapped shut. She also claimed that inside his garage, she saw a large concrete block sitting on some type of wooden pallet. Then she told police that Chris asked her for help moving the concrete structure, this concrete block that was on the pallet, inside the back of the U-Haul truck, but it was too heavy to move. So instead, Trisha just got in the U-Haul truck because Chris said, let's go for a ride. So Trisha said that they stopped 2 times on this little U-Haul joyride they were taking.
But they didn't have the concrete pallet in there.
They did not. They could not get in there.
The freezer was in there.
The freezer was in there. So the first stop, they stopped behind some random business where she said that Prestipino disposed of the freezer in a dumpster. And then they stopped behind the Paris Hotel and Casino where he tried to take a forklift, but was unable to take it for one reason or the other. Ott said to him, you're supposed to have clearance to be in this area, but somehow Christopher was able to enter that area, try to get the forklift, couldn't get it, and then drove away. Ott said that at this point, Prestipino was scaring her, which really, at this point, are you kidding? But fine. And she said that Chris was acting strange and kept turning the radio up so loud because he kept saying he thought the FBI was listening. So once they got back to his house, apparently she left.
Who has paranoia now?
I'll tell you who doesn't. Trish. What are you doing? Did you show up at his house, Trish? And he told you this story about this woman that came over. He fed her methamphetamines. She freaked out. He tied her up, that he beat her and strangled her. And then he says, oh, hey, by the way, can you help me move this concrete block into the back of my U-Haul with the freezer I have back there? What the fuck?
Maybe Trish had a thing for Prestipino.
I don't care if you are the most spectacular man in the world. If you tell me that you strangled a woman and then you don't finish the story and you're like, anyways, I'm hoping you can help me move this concrete into my rented U-Haul and we could go for a little ride. I'm out of there. fucking run away so fast?
I wouldn't. Guess what I'd ask before I run away?
What?
What's the end of the story, man? Like, you're going to end there. I tied her up. I hit her. We ate methamphetamine or however people take meth. And then, okay, hey, can I bother you for a lifting muscle? You know, like.
No, that's a very good point. So earlier you pointed out murderers. I said murderers. And you were so right. Christopher was not the only person involved in this crime. Enter Cassandra Garrett, or Cassandra Boscones, or Cassandra Tran, or Nikki Hart. This woman went by many aliases. Cassandra was Prestipino's 39-year-old roommate at the time of the incident with Esmeralda. And I don't know much about her, except for that Cassandra apparently had a really big mouth. There are 2 separate people that came forward to the police after Cassandra had shared stories about an incident involving a woman that Chris, quote, brought home to their house. She told one of her friends, Valerie, that she was involved in a sex fetish game gone wrong with Chris and this woman. She also told her boyfriend at the time, who then told another woman, who ultimately went to the police, that Christopher had invited a woman into their home and they had been using drugs together. And although this woman was initially fine, at a certain point she wanted to leave. And because Chris had multiple felony drug charges, he was scared to let this woman leave for fear that she would go to the police. So what did him and Cassandra do? What else do you do when someone's at your house and they want to leave, but you don't want them to? You tie them up to a stripper pole, which is exactly what Chris and Cassandra did. They tied up this woman who, at the time, no one knew that it was Esmeralda, but they tied her up to a stripper pole in Chris's bedroom. They left her tied up there for several days, ultimately deciding we have to kill her. Cassandra said that they both beat Esmeralda, but she just wouldn't die. One of these tipsters told investigators that Cassandra said, "You'd be surprised how long someone will fight for their life." Apparently, Cassandra was also very annoyed with Chris, who got tired during this incident where they were trying to beat her to death. And Cassandra made fun of Chris for not being able to finish Esmeralda off, which is then when Cassandra decided, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And she got a syringe and filled it with pool cleaner and injected it into Esmeralda, which ultimately killed her.
That's all awful. And I have a lot of feelings that I can't quite sort through. And also, thank God. I mean, in a way, not thank God that she killed her, but like
putting her out of her misery, I guess. Yeah. I had never heard of anybody being killed ever by pool cleaner. And I wasn't quite sure what that entailed. So I guess there's 2 different types of pool cleaner, a chlorine-based or a chemical called bromide-based. Either way, it's highly poisonous and it basically destroys and poisons all of your tissue in your body. It attacks your nervous system and basically it will stop your lungs from expanding, stop your heart from beating, your kidneys will shut down.
Your organs all slowly go to shit.
Your organs all slowly go to shit. And it's not immediately, but it is pretty quickly depending on the dosage. If it's a high enough dose, it can be fatal after a few minutes. But those few minutes are apparently excruciating because it attacks your entire nervous system. So you feel everything.
Which is kind of like, which one is less excruciating?
I don't know.
Being beat to death slowly over 5-7 days. Or getting something shot into your body and feeling immense pain over 5 to 7 minutes. Like, it's all terrible.
That's an interesting question, actually. And I don't know. That's a
Thank
question
goodness.
I can't answer. And I hope I never have to even think about.
Well, you won't be able to answer if you ever come in contact with those situations.
You don't want to miss what happens next in today's murder story. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a short message from our sponsors. I just want to recap our timeline here. So Esmeralda was reported missing on May 30th or 31st. Chris rented and then returned a U-Haul from June 8th to 10th. Police received several tips from various people in late July 2019 about Christopher Prestipino potentially kidnapping/murdering a woman. And Esmeralda's body was not actually discovered until October 8th, 2019. And it's unfortunately still unclear exactly how they came to find it. Obviously, they were tipped off to Prestipino and then found the surveillance and what he bought. And, certainly were led down this path. I mean, he basically left fucking breadcrumbs for them.
They put the pieces of the puzzle together.
He did not make it difficult. This was like an easy baby puzzle. So her body was found in a makeshift wooden structure in the desert near Glendale, Nevada, filled with concrete. Inside the concrete, investigators found a body, but could not initially confirm that it was Esmeralda due to the extreme decomposition. It took a good amount of forensic work to discover that this was her. But essentially, once they found this concrete block and broke into it, they described that Esmeralda's hands were bound. There was white tape around her head and neck. Her body was wrapped in blankets and ultimately stuffed inside a 250-gallon water tank that was then filled with concrete and covered with wood. So he went, that's an extreme burial.
I don't want to call it a burial because to me, burial means I care about
she
this
was not
person.
Buried.
I want to honor
that
them.
That is an extreme disposing of a body. Yeah, you're totally correct on that. Before they were able to forensically determine that it was her, they found numerous pieces of designer jewelry next to the body in this tarp and blankets. They found a Chanel necklace that matched one that she was wearing in pictures on her Instagram. They also came across a Rolex watch that was matched to a Rolex watch appraisal that she had done. Her name was on it. It was valued at $40,000. So to me, that says this was a crime of circumstance. He killed her.
He wasn't after her fancy jewelry.
Right. Who leaves a $40,000 Rolex? He wasn't killing her to rob her. He was killing her because
he thought he had to. He got scared and paranoid.
The Clark County Coroner's Office used bone DNA from Esmeralda's body and compared it to DNA from her parents to confirm that it was her. And Dr. Elisa Gavin from the coroner's office testified that Esmeralda's body had, even after all those months, had a strange chemical smell to it rather than just the smell of decomposition due to being injected by pool cleaner. So no big surprise, but Prestipino and his roommate, Cassandra Garrett, were prime suspects in this case. But there was yet another person that was connected to this case, and that is Lisa Mort, Chris's girlfriend at the time. Detectives initially questioned Lisa Mort about Esmeralda's disappearance and Chris's possible connection to it when she was already in custody after being arrested and going to jail for an unrelated drug crime.
Lisa,
Chris's girlfriend, yeah. So Mort at this point is denying knowing anything about Esmeralda or the crime. Unfortunately, these criminal geniuses that we're dealing with here, after they questioned her in jail, she got on the phone to Prestipino and said, I just got some visitors. You got to go, baby. You got to go. That's all I can say, but you got to go.
Oh, she said that from her in jail call.
Yeah.
Calls.
Yep.
Oh.
Which are fucking recorded, you dumb shit. I'm glad she did that because I'm glad that these people got caught, obviously. Also, I can't help but think, how stupid are you? Why would you say anything on a jail phone?
Well, part of her or all of her knew that they are being recorded because she said, that's all I can say. She said too much. But
that's too much.
Sure. But she knew to some extent.
Ugh. So what do you think Prestipino did after she called him and said that?
Went.
He did. He went. He went to Belize, though police couldn't arrest him quite yet. But they were able to use this phone call and several others between him and this girlfriend in jail that were recorded to kind of connect the dots as to Lisa's potential involvement. They didn't know to what degree, but obviously she knew about it if she's warning him. And so they claimed that she was a co-conspirator and charged her with harboring, concealing, or aiding a felon. And for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure, Prestipino came back from Belize. I mean, if I was him, I would have just stayed gone. But he came back from Belize on October 11th, and he was immediately taken into custody at the airport and charged.
Oh, he wasn't there very long.
He was not.
Yeah.
And he was charged with murder, first-degree kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder. And Cassandra Garrett, the roommate, don't forget, she was taken into custody on October 18th and charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy charges. What idiots. Like, how have you never, he was a fan of Dexter. Have you never watched a murder crime show? How are you this stupid when committing a crime? Oh, I'm going to be caught on camera buying lye and concrete and renting a U-Haul and then making phone calls to jail that I know are recorded. Like, what is wrong with you?
I'm not sure.
You think that they were not stupid in this?
No, I think they were just people who don't typically murder.
Okay, that's fair.
Also, like Dexter, like me, watched Dexter and thought, whoa, that's dope. And maybe learned some things and also didn't take notes and identify them, like put them on markers in their brain. And also, that guy, the night it happened, was tweaking out, it sounds. So,
Well,
like,
that's true. Drugs were involved.
Drugs were involved, which I get this was a couple days later and he went to Home Depot and this and that. Well, also, there is no excuse. There doesn't need to be. He's
a murderer.
He's a murderer and also
is bad at it.
He's bad at it.
Which good. I mean, honestly, someone who's bad at murder, that's a good thing because then they get caught and murdered.
Unless you stay in Belize.
Right. Well, a good murderer stays in Belize. A bad murderer comes home.
Good murderer.
That's true. I guess there isn't such a thing as a good murderer. And I certainly don't mean to make light of this. I'm just saying.
An efficient murderer.
Right. Exactly.
Also, it doesn't seem like he put no thought into it. Did you hear about the structure he created for this?
But that's what I mean. He put a lot of thought into it and then did a bad job of covering it up. And this is not a show advocating for murder. So I feel like we're going down a bad path here.
Whether he was highly efficient or a goddamn gosh darn idiot at murder.
You're allowed to curse on here.
I know, but goddamn feels a little off-putting for some people. He does it like, what a fucking creepy
horrible
motherfucker.
Person. Yeah.
And I also understand that drugs were involved and maybe it wasn't premeditated. Also, he could have fully done something different. Even if he had already tied her up and hit her in the face.
Yeah, there was 1,000 other better ways to handle this, obviously.
Good grief. Now he'll die in jail.
Well, we're not done yet. In court papers, Prestipino's lawyer, Bill Terry, he has since passed away since this happened.
Too much stress.
Probably. He argued that Prestipino was not a flight risk, and he said that he had returned to Las Vegas from a very short vacation, and then he was arrested, so he was not a flight risk. Somehow, he was assigned the most ridiculous judge ever, and he granted Prestipino a $500,000 bail, which Prestipino promptly posted. And the judge confirmed on November 19th that Prestipino would be on house arrest while awaiting trial. What the fuck?
I have a lot of thoughts and opinions. You're probably going to have to cut this, but I'm going to say we live in America. Institutions like money, $500,000 bail.
The judge, to me, in my opinion, was very wrong. And the community caught wind that Prestipino would be posting bail and be released soon. And they were not happy. A notice of public safety went out in the community that read, Christopher Prestipino, accused of murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy, has been granted bail and is currently living on Trailside Drive in Henderson until his hearing in April 2020. Curfew is 6 p.m. nightly. If you see something, say something. Please do not approach this man. Ultimately, the judge regained his sanity and revoked bail. And so he was supposed to stand trial in April of 2020, but his lawyers requested that he undergo a competency evaluation before his trial due to Christopher Prestipino reportedly hearing voices and suffering from a diminished memory of the events that occurred. It was determined that he would not be permitted to stand trial until they could prove that he was competent and understood the crimes that he was being accused of. And as of November 2020, he was committed to a psychiatric hospital, and the murder trial was put on hold until apparently May of 2021. And beyond that, nothing. That's it. It ends with Christopher Prestipino was committed to a psychiatric hospital. The other two, Cassandra and Lisa, took plea deals. And beyond that, I have no fucking idea. And it is driving me crazy. And more than anything, what about fucking Esmeralda's family? There's no justice for her, for them. There's no anything. This is a frustrating one because there is no conclusion. I know generally I think that people kind of hate an inconclusive story. I'd love to put it out there. Anybody who knows or has any information on this case, we would love to hear from you. And beyond that, we will say thank you for listening. What do you always say? What is your sign off?
Good night and good luck.
Good night and good luck. I don't know good luck to what, but I like it.
Life's hard, guys.
Life is hard. So good night and good luck in life. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And if you want to see pictures of the victims, the murderers, and any additional related images, head over to our Instagram right now. Our handle across all social media platforms is death, then the letter X, and then Southwest spelled out. So DEATHX SOUTHWEST. Death X Southwest.
Death by Southwest is a Cavalry audio production.
Hosted by Jenna Gerald and Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Margot Carmichael.
Associate produced by Jenna Gerald.
Executive produced by Dana Brunetti and Keegan Rosenberger.
Audio editing and sound design by Revision Sound.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, good night and good luck.